I'm Ann Arnold. I'm one of the daughters of Vincent Arnold. We're here to talk about today. And I was born in 1961, a few years before we moved to Newport County.
I'm David Arnold. I'm Vince Arnold's fourth child, born in 1958 in Syracuse, New York, before we moved to Aquidneck Island in 1965. Mm-hmm. I remember that day we moved here. I didn't even know I was Irish until I started going to the St. Patrick's Day parades.
Right,
What do you remember about those parades?
Very little, to be honest with you, except marching as a we did the baton twirling. So I remember doing the baton twirling with Mrs. Gilmore's group of twirlers, where we studied baton twirling at the Hut, which is behind the Newport Library. But I don't remember watching the parade because we were busy being in the parade. When we were maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, I remember at school you could wear a green tie. We had uniforms for Catholic school, but I think, or a pocket square, the boys had some kind of green thing. Dad would have a pocket square, you might have a tie.
Right.
And the girls, we had green ribbons in our hair, so that was a little something for St. Patrick's Day, but I don't remember special food or any of that. Certainly not corned beef and cabbage in those days.
We couldn't afford that.
Well, David mentioned that we moved here in 65. It was February, and we moved into a new housing development in Middletown because Dad had scoped the place out, come up from Long Island without our mother to look at a place for 6 children under the age of 8. And he looked at Newport, loved Newport. He had a real heart for Newport, but there was no appropriate housing. He felt they had enough bathrooms and a modern enough. So we bought a raised ranch in Middletown off Valley Road.
Right. I think he wanted to buy one of those beautiful old Newport houses and restore it and fix it up. But with 6 kids, he just didn't have the time.
Right.
I think he would have liked to do it, but Mom, no. She needed a house ready to go with 6 kids. She didn't want him, pounding nails on weekends and scraping paint and doing that. So that's, he acquiesced to her, and they got their house in Middletown, and we're there for 50 years almost.
Something like that, yeah. He sold it, I guess, about 2 years before he died.
Yeah. My father's grandmother, Bridget McDonough, came from Arrowslannon near Clifton in Ireland sometime in the 1880s. She married James Murphy, who was already here, and born to Patrick Murphy. And Patrick Murphy came from Ireland. He had 7 children, and they were all born here. The earliest one was around, I want to say 1862 or 1858 to 62 were the youngest children born here. So he came sometime before 1850.
So I was thinking how Dad got sort of involved in this whole Irish thing.
I guess it was in the 90s he started putting his museum together, and I noticed every time I came home to visit, now I had a family, but I would use my old bedroom. Wasn't available anymore. I used Jimmy's bedroom or something. And my old bedroom was just full of books and pictures and stacks and stacks
old
and
photos
stacks
and
and photos.
things.
What are you doing with all this stuff? And he was spending hours and hours and hours just combing through material.
So as he approached retirement, he started assembling a group of fellow men and women interested in the same thing, created a board of directors, and I think the Museum of Newport Irish History was 1996 officially established. Now they changed the name along the way. I think they started out as the Newport Museum of Irish History, and then someone pointed out the Newport Museum of Irish History, you could have the Philadelphia Museum of Irish History, the Dublin Museum of Irish History. It doesn't speak to Newport. So they renamed it grammatically correctly as the Museum of Newport Irish History. And I saw the name change along the way because I saw the logo change and the old newsletters. So by 1996, 97, he was cranking out these little simple newsletters talking about their initiatives, what they had planned. And the first sort of big project or public project was the restoration of the Barney Street Cemetery. Right. And that always had, his heart was always in that. That was the first thing they did that the community could see. They had to get permission from the Diocese of Providence to work with the place, dig up the gravestones, restore them, put up a fence, and essentially we have a lease with the diocese, something like that lets us keep it up. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a rallying point to grow the membership, and it was. So I look back at the records, but 1999 was when the cemetery was completed and rededicated. The bishop came down. They had a little ceremony. We have clippings of that. And we still have a group of volunteers that goes many times a year and beautifies it and takes care of it. They just met last week again. So he'd be touched. I always say, Dad'd be so touched looking down, seeing people do that. It's reminding David that they had this idea to do this brochure of a tour of Irish Newport, self-guided, essentially. But I have to imagine that was the inspiration for this annual driving tour of Irish Newport. We call it a trolley tour. So the Viking Tours of Newport generously give us a trolley every year. We invite the public, and it's essentially a live, narrated docent tour of many of those same spots, and it's generally always sold out. And what we added last year and repeated this March is two tours. So one left at 12, the other leaves at 2 or something like this. So we're 10 and 12, I've forgotten, from Hibernian Hall. And generally it's full every year. And
That's great.
yeah, it's very popular. I don't even take it anymore because I want to have a seat for someone who's never taken it.